The Doppelganger. Jack Salomon woke with his cheek pressed against cold brick, the chill biting through his skin before his mind could fully surface. For several seconds he didn't move. He listened instead. Somewhere above the narrow alley, a streetlight buzzed faintly, its rhythm uneven, like a dying insect trapped behind glass. Water dripped from an unseen gutter in slow, patient taps that echoed too loudly in the confined space. The air smelled of wet concrete and old rust, the kind of smell that clung to forgotten places and never quite left. When Jack exhaled, his breath came out in pale clouds, and the sight of it unsettled him more than it should have. It meant it was cold. It meant it was morning. It meant time had been moving forward without him. He pushed himself up on one elbow, wincing as a dull ache spread through his ribs. It wasn't the sharp pain of a clear injury, but something deeper and wrong, like his body remembered being hurt, even if his mind didn't. Fog filled the alley from end to end, thick and colorless, creeping inward like something deliberate, something patient. The brick wall behind him was damp and uneven, flakes of old mortar crumbling under his fingers as he shifted his weight. He tried to remember how he had gotten there. The attempt failed instantly. The thought didn't open a memory, didn't even brush against one. It struck a blank wall and stopped. There was no recollection of driving, no bar, no argument, no late-night errand, not even the vague sense of falling asleep somewhere else and waking here. It felt as though the last part of his life had been cleanly removed, edited out without leaving even a rough edge behind. The absence wasn't foggy or confusing, it was absolute, and that frightened him more than fragmented memories ever could. Jack looked down at himself. A winter jacket, damp at the elbows, jeans smeared with grit and salt, boots crusted with half-frozen slush. No blood, no obvious wounds, yet there was a heavy pressure behind his eyes, and his mouth carried a faint metallic taste that made his stomach tighten. He patted his pockets, once at first, then again more urgently. No phone, no wallet. His heart rate spiked as he checked again, fingers digging into seams as if he could force the missing objects to appear. Nothing. Then his hand closed around something solid in his right pocket. Keys, car keys. Relief flooded him so fast it made him dizzy, but it didn't last. It curdled almost immediately into something colder. Why did he have his keys but not his phone? Why would anyone leave those behind? Why would he? He stood slowly, legs stiff and unsteady, and walked toward the mouth of the alley. Beyond it, the town lay submerged in fog beneath a sky that looked permanently exhausted, a flat, oppressive grey with no hint of sunlight behind it. Street signs emerged and vanished as the mist shifted. A closed diner with dark windows, a laundromat with a flickering neon sign that buzzed in time with the streetlight behind him. Small houses set back from the road, their windows black, as if the people inside were deliberately avoiding the outside world. Jack didn't recognize any of it. He tried to name the place anyway. Towns had names, streets had names. Giving something a name made it real, manageable. Nothing came. His pulse quickened as he scanned the street again, and then he saw it. His car, parked across the road, angled slightly wrong, as if someone had pulled in too fast and hadn't bothered correcting it. The sight anchored him in a way nothing else had. The familiar shape, the dull color, the small crack in the rear bumper on the right side, the one he'd promised Marina he'd get fixed months ago. It was his. There was no doubt. He crossed the street quickly, boots crunching softly on frost, half expecting a car to emerge silently from the fog and hit him. but the road remained empty. When he reached the driver's side door, he tried the handle. Unlocked. He slid inside and shut the door hard, the sound echoing too loudly in the stillness. He locked it immediately, then realized how irrational that was, and felt no better for it. The interior smelled like old coffee and pine-scented air freshener. His jacket brushed against the seat in a way that felt familiar enough to make his throat tighten. Jack inserted the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine coughed once, then settled into a low, steady rumble. The sound grounded him. Machines didn't lie. Machines did what they were built to do. He turned on the GPS and tapped home without thinking. The screen glowed softly as it loaded. When the route appeared, his breath caught in his throat. Distance, 112 miles. Estimated time, 2 hours, 7 minutes. He stared at the numbers, waiting for the system to correct itself, to redraw the route, to do something. It didn't. He zoomed out on the map, then in again. The result didn't change. He was more than 100 miles from home, and he couldn't remember leaving. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went pale. He tried to reason with himself, tried to force logic into the growing panic. Maybe he'd driven here last night and blacked out. Maybe there had been a fight or stress, or something he'd buried so deeply his mind had shut it out. But his tongue didn't taste like alcohol. His jacket didn't smell like smoke or beer. His hands weren't shaking the way they did when he drank too much. He glanced down at the gas gauge, nearly empty. A red warning light blinked patiently, as if amused. Jack swore under his breath and pulled onto the road anyway, following the GPS as fog swallowed the car almost immediately. The town seemed to bend around him, streets looping in subtle, disorienting ways. Parked cars sat like abandoned shells along the curb, frost sealing them shut. A bundled figure crossed the road ahead of him, without once looking up, head down, hands shoved deep into their pockets, moving with the slow inevitability of habit. The gas gauge sank lower with every minute. Near the edge of town, just past a small cemetery and a line of skeletal trees, he saw a gas station. It looked barely functional, like it existed only because no one had bothered to tear it down yet. One pump on each side, a squat building with peeling paint and a sign so faded it was almost unreadable. Jack pulled in. The tires crunched over gravel, the sound unnaturally loud. Fog drifted across the lot in slow waves, and for a moment the place looked abandoned. Then the door opened. An old man stepped out, wearing a heavy coat over a faded flannel shirt. His hair was thin and grey, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were sharp and pale, fixing on Jack with a focus that made his skin prickle. It wasn't curiosity, it was recognition. Jack got out of the car and nodded. "Morning." The old man didn't answer immediately. He looked Jack over as if comparing him to an image burned into memory. "You're back," the man said finally. Jack frowned. "Sorry?" "You need gas," the man said, not quite a question. Inside, the station smelled of oil and stale tobacco. A small heater hummed uselessly in the corner. Shelves held dusty snacks and faded packaging. Jack paid with a handful of coins and a crumpled bill he didn't remember having, then explained carefully that he had woken up in town without his phone or wallet and needed to call his wife. As he spoke, he noticed the old man's hand trembling. The old man hesitated, then slid his phone across the counter. Jack dialed Marina's number from memory. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. He tried again. Static filled the line, thick and aggressive. and then her voice came through, distorted, but unmistakable. "Marina?" Jack said, relief flooding him. "Jack," she replied. He started to speak, words tumbling over each other, but she cut him off, her tone light, almost amused. "Jack, why are you calling me?" The line dissolved into static. Jack tried again. No answer. Again. Nothing. When he turned back to the old man, he saw fear carved deeply into the man's face. "Every morning," the old man whispered. 3 days now. You come in. You say you woke up in the alley. You ask for the phone. You make the call." Jack shook his head. "That's not possible." The old man took a long swallow from a bottle of bourbon behind the counter, his hand shaking. "Don't go back," he said. "Something's waiting there." Jack left. The drive home felt longer than it should have. The fog thinned but never lifted entirely, and his thoughts circled a single question he couldn't escape. If Marina thought he was home, then who did she think was home with her? When he turned onto his street, relief surged through him, until he saw a man on his porch repairing the front door. As Jack approached, recognition hit like ice through his veins. The man turned. It was him. Not a resemblance, not a look-alike. Himself. Then Jack saw the eyes. They were red, but not the red of irritation or burst blood vessels. This was something deeper, older, a color that did not belong to the surface of a living eye. The whites were stained a sickly gray, as though smoke had soaked into them over time, and the pupils were stretched and misshapen, pulled too wide, as if whatever looked out from behind them needed more room than a human eye was meant to give. Looking into them hurt, not just in a physical way, but somewhere behind Jack's thoughts, as if his mind recoiled instinctively, like flesh flinching away from heat. It felt like staring into a mirror that reflected not his face, but the space behind it, the empty place where his certainty of self had always been. The longer he looked, the more wrong they became. They didn't simply see him. They evaluated him, measured him. There was recognition there, yes, but also impatience, like something tired of pretending, something annoyed that it still had to deal with him at all. Jack realized, with a sinking horror, that the eyes were not copying his own. They were wearing them. Marina stepped out onto the porch then, drawn by the sound of his voice, and the world seemed to tilt. For half a heartbeat, her face was neutral, caught between one moment and the next. Then her gaze locked onto Jack, standing frozen at the edge of the driveway, and terror flooded her expression so completely it robbed him of breath. Her mouth opened, but what came out was not his name spoken in recognition. It was his name spoken in fear. She stumbled backward, her hands grasping desperately for the man behind her, burying herself against his chest, as though seeking shelter from something monstrous. From him. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking, her eyes never leaving Jack. "Please stop." She clung to the double, fingers digging into his jacket, and Jack saw with a sick certainty that she didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't see. To her, the man on the porch was her husband. Solid, familiar, safe. The thing with the eyes turned slightly, just enough to look down at her, and its hand came up to rest against her back in a gesture so natural, so perfectly rehearsed, that Jack felt something inside him tear loose. She couldn't see the eyes. She couldn't see what he saw. Jack took a step forward, his legs trembling. "Marina," he tried again, his voice breaking, desperate. "Look at him. Just look at his eyes." She squeezed them shut, shaking her head violently, as if trying to force the world back into a shape she could understand. "Go away," she sobbed. please, just go away." The double's gaze returned to Jack, and something like satisfaction flickered behind those distorted pupils. That was when Jack understood. There was no way back. Something in his chest collapsed, hollowing him out, and instinct took over, where hope finally failed. He turned and ran. He barely remembered getting into the car. The engine roared to life, tires screeching as he tore away from the curb, the house shrinking behind him, Marina's silhouette still pressed against the wrong body. He drove without direction, without thought, following roads that narrowed and twisted, pulling him deeper into the woods beyond town. Trees closed in on both sides, bare branches clawing at the fog as it thickened again, swallowing the headlights until the beams felt weak and useless. His breath came in ragged gasps, chest tight, hands locked around the steering wheel so hard his fingers went numb. His thoughts fractured, looping back on themselves. The eyes, Marina's scream, the way the double had held her, protective, possessive, the certainty that whatever that thing was, it knew him better than anyone ever had. He glanced at the dashboard clock. Night, full, absolute night. The realization hit him like a blow. It couldn't be night. It had been early afternoon. The sun hadn't even begun to sink. Yet outside, darkness pressed in from all sides, heavy and complete. The woods reduced to towering black shapes that seemed to lean closer the longer he stared. Jack slammed the brakes and the car skidded to a halt on the side of the road. Silence rushed in. He sat there shaking, listening to the ticking of the cooling engine and the distant whisper of wind through the trees. His mind raced, searching for explanations, for any version of reality where this made sense. But every thought slid off the same conclusion. He wasn't supposed to be here. Something moved behind him. Not the wind, not an animal. Footsteps, slow, unhurried, certain. Jack's heart hammered so violently he thought it might tear itself apart. He reached for the door lock, pressing the button again and again, though it was already engaged. The footsteps stopped just behind his car. For one terrible second, there was nothing. Then the driver's side window exploded inward. Glass sprayed across the seat and his face, sharp fragments biting into his skin. But the pain barely registered before a hand punched through the opening and grabbed him by the collar. The strength behind it was inhuman, effortless. Jack screamed as he was yanked forward, dragged over the shattered glass, his body scraping against the door frame. He saw the eyes in the fog. Up close, they were worse. They filled his vision, burning, endless, and he felt a crushing pressure in his head, like something reaching inward, squeezing, peeling him apart layer by layer. He flailed uselessly, fists striking flesh that felt too solid, too unyielding. The double hauled him out of the car and slammed him onto the road. Jack's back hit the asphalt, and his breath burst from his lungs in a wet, choking sound. Before he could even try to crawl away, a foot came down on his chest. He felt ribs crack beneath the weight, sharp pain lancing through him, and he screamed again, the sound tearing his throat raw. The double crouched over him, expression calm, almost bored. It worked quickly, efficiently. It broke him the way someone breaks an object they no longer need intact. Arms twisted until bones gave way. Legs snapped with dull, sickening sounds. Jack's world dissolved into pain and disbelief, his mind scrambling to escape a body that could no longer obey him. When it was done, he could barely move, barely breathe. The double grabbed him and dragged him toward the back of the car. The trunk opened with a hollow sound, and Jack was thrown inside like refuse. The lid slammed shut, plunging him into suffocating darkness. The car started, Time lost meaning in the trunk. Pain blurred into numbness. The movement of the car became a distant, nauseating sway, punctuated by bumps that sent fresh waves of agony through what remained of his awareness. At some point, he cried. At some point, he begged. No sound escaped. When the trunk finally opened again, cold air washed over him, carrying a smell he recognized instantly. Wet concrete. Rust. He was dragged out and across rough ground, his broken body leaving a faint trail behind him. The fog was thick here, familiar. When his head lolled to the side, he saw the brick walls rising up around him. The alley, the same alley. The double stood over him, blocking what little light there was, its eyes the only thing that seemed truly alive in the world. It leaned down, fingers closing around Jack's throat. "Can't you stay dead already, Jack?" it said, its voice identical to his own, right down to the slightest inflection. "Do you have any idea how exhausting this is?" Jack tried to speak, tried to scream, but only air rasped from his lungs. "I'm living your life now," the double continued calmly. "I wake up in your bed. I drink your coffee. I kiss your wife good morning, and she kisses me back. She doesn't hesitate. She doesn't doubt. Why would she?" The grip tightened. "She can't see my eyes," it whispered. "Not unless I want her to. And I don't." Jack's vision darkened at the edges. "You keep coming back here," the double went on, irritation creeping into its tone. "You keep trying to go home. You keep calling her. You don't understand, do you?" Its face moved closer, until the eyes filled Jack's fading world. "You died," it said softly, "and this is just what's left. Your mind replaying the moment, again, and again, and again." The fingers tightened. "There's only one way this ends." Jack felt a sharp final pressure, a crack, then nothing. No pain, no fear, no thought, just darkness. For a while, the darkness was peaceful. Then faintly, a streetlight buzzed. Water dripped, slow and patient, from an unseen gutter. The air smelled of wet concrete and old rust. Jack Salomon woke with his cheek pressed against cold brick, and for a few seconds, he didn't move.